This video is essentially a part 2 to the video I did with my buddy KalebIA a while back, ranking the League of Villains from weakest to strongest, but since that video was made, a lot has changed in the My Hero Academia universe, so I figured now could be a good time to take another swing at this. Since the group became more established during the summer training camp arc, the main villains of My Hero Academia have been some of my favorite characters in the entire series. The way they're written, their designs, their quirks, and the way their quirks work were always such a pleasure to see on panel and in the anime. And this love for the villains became even stronger when the League of Villains and the Meta Liberation Army merged forces to create the Paranormal Liberation Front. So in this video, I'm going to be ranking the Paranormal Liberation Front from weakest to strongest. And before I talk about the first villain on the list, I want to preface a couple things. I'm only going to be talking about the main lieutenants of the organization, which are Shigure Aki, Dobby, Toga, Twice, rest in peace, Spinner, Mr. Compress, Redestro, Trumpet, Skeptic, and Deaton. So no Gigantomachia or Slide and Go or Kaminari's second uncle Twice removed. Sorry about that. Also, the way this is going to be structured is who can beat who in a fight when it comes to the other lieutenants. A high destructive power quirk doesn't necessarily mean said villain will win a fight against another with a less destructive quirk. So at the very bottom, I'm going to be putting Trumpet. The main issue with Trumpet is his quirk is incredibly good with supporting, but it's really bad, if not completely useless, when it comes to a normal one-on-one fight. His quirk Insight allows him to enhance the physical and mental state of someone whenever he talks, but only if the person or people he's trying to use Insight on consider him a worthy leader. So it's kind of like La Brava, but better, in a sense. His stats from the Ultra Analysis book are pretty cheeks too. 1 in both speed and power, 4s in technique and intelligence, with a 5 in centripetal force. You know, I want these scenarios for these theoretical 1v1s where said villain doesn't get their quirk hyper buff, so giving Trumpet 100 people to use for a fight would be dumb. But even if he was able to use one person, that person would need to see him as a noble leader, and whoever sees Trumpet as that probably isn't that strong themselves to begin with. Next up, we have Skeptic. Skeptic runs into similar issues as Trumpet. His quirk Anthropomorph allows him to turn human-sized objects like fridges, motorcycles, etc. into a humanoid puppet. Skeptic can choose how these puppets look too, as he was able to make his puppets look like Twice to explore his trauma. However, as far as I'm aware, these puppets can't use the quirk of the person whose physical appearance they replicate, which is a shame because if they could, he'd potentially be a lot higher on this list. But yeah, all in all, Skeptic is kind of just scuffed Twice. Third up is Spinner. He was previously listed as the weakest member of the villains when they were just the League of Villains, but Skeptic and Trumpet joining the org indirectly buffed him, I guess. He hasn't really gotten that much stronger since his introduction, to be honest. The only thing we learned about him is that his quirk is Gecko, which was sort of obvious before he was officially named, considering how he looks. Basically, he can just stick to walls without falling off. I will say he still has impressive sword-wielding skills / physical strength to boot. The makeshift sword he wields is about as big as he is, and he swings it around with, very little trouble. He also put up a solid fight against Mandalay, one of the Wild Pussycats. Granted, he technically lost to her in the end, but I still respect how their fight went down. He was giving her a little bit of trouble. Now, the next few are a little bit tricky to properly order, so hopefully I don't get flamed for this. Next up is Mr. Compress. In the video Caleb and I did about the League, this guy was placed higher than both Toga and Twice, but those two have gotten a lot stronger since. Compress still has an incredibly strong quirk. It has the ability to one-shot somebody in theory because he could just compress somebody's head off to win a fight, but he has yet to do that, and I don't think he would do that, to be honest. So far, he's only fully compressed people like Bakugo and Tokoyami, or compressed a less significant part of somebody's body than a head, like Kai Chisaki's arm. He's also able to compress random objects like boulders, which allow for various cool tricks to his quirk to help with the range issue. After Compress comes Toga. Toga was already pretty strong in her own right to begin with. She was one of the fastest members in the League of Villains besides Shigure Aki, along with being incredibly skilled at wielding a knife. She's been seen holding her own against Ochako, Asui, Deku, Eraserhead, and Rocklock without receiving any major injuries from those several encounters. Plus, Toga got a huge buff to her quirk during My Villain Academia. If Toga transforms into somebody whose quirk she has enough background knowledge on, she can use that person's quirk while in her transform state. So far, she's only been able to do this with Ochako's quirk though, but to be honest, just that quirk alone is kind of insane. I think that quirk is incredibly broken. It just hasn't been utilized to its fullest potential yet by either Toga or Ochako. As far as I'm aware, Ochako is the only individual Toga has enough info on to use the quirk once she transforms, because she's kind of in love with Ochako in a sense. She does have Deku's blood, but there's no way she has info about One For All. There's no way. Rocklock and Kaney are possible contenders for future Toga quirk usage though, which makes her so much more of a threat than before. If Compress actually had some showings during the fight against the Liberation Army, maybe he'd be higher than Toga, but just like Dobby said, he didn't do shit. Which was honestly a shame, because that ended up being one of my main gripes with that arc. Compress was the only member that got completely shafted during that arc and literally did nothing. Sorry, I'm getting sidetracked. Back to the rankings. Next up is Dobby. Before Shigure Aki awakened his quirk and Deaton became a lieutenant, Dobby was the only member of the league capable of long-ranged AoE attacks that dealt a lot of physical damage to somebody. I say that because Kurogiri had range, but his warp gate couldn't physically hurt an opponent, rather just teleport them. Scientifically speaking, Dobby has the strongest fire-based quirk in the My Hero universe due to his fire being blue. Blue flames are only created when the fire is somewhere in between 2600 and 3000 degrees Fahrenheit, whereas Todoroki or Endeavor's orange flames peak at 2200 degrees Fahrenheit. Dobby was able to defeat the Sand Hero Snatch with relative ease, as well as dominate the number 2 hero Hawks for a good while before Tokoyami came in to assist Hawks. Granted, that's not saying much because fire-based quirks absolutely hard counter Hawks, and Hawks was also dealing with twice at the same time Dobby showed up, so he wasn't able to focus 100% on Dobby. The biggest drawback with Dobby's quirk though is he's not good at fighting against people for long periods of time. Because of how powerful his flames are, his body isn't able to stand up to the intense heat, so his skin starts to burn severely from overusage. That's why he looks the way he does. If Dobby didn't have that weakness, he'd probably be a spot or two higher on this list. The number 4 spot goes to Twice. Rest in peace to the homie. Initially, I was thinking of having him below Dobby because, to be honest, they're really close in power levels, I think. When Twice overcame his trauma during My Villain Academia, he became so much stronger, just like Toga. Being able to create thousands of clones of himself now with the use of Sadman's Parade. People like Geron have told Twice that he has the power to take over an entire country by himself if he used his ability correctly. I guess the main drawback to Double is the more clones Twice produces, the weaker the clones will become. For instance, if one of his doubles creates a double, that newest clone could be destroyed just from an injury that's equivalent to a broken bone. But as far as I'm aware, the original Twice doesn't suffer any fatigue-related drawbacks for spam cloning himself from the original body. So even with Dobby's incredibly long-ranged firepower, I think Twice would be able to outlast Dobby in the long run. Number 3 is Deaton. Whatever the fuck you want to call him, but I like saying Deaton. Some of you may think Deaton is a little too high and should be below Dobby/Twice, but here's the thing. Deaton is basically Ice Dobby in the sense that he's got the strongest ice quirk we've seen in the verse so far. On paper, Dobby should have been destroying this guy, but Deaton had the upper hand for the most part until Gigantomachia came into the city. Deaton's ice manipulation quirk allows him to control all nearby ice, and the range of the ice he can control can be up to the length of an entire town. So, for instance, if Deaton is standing on the northernmost part of a city and could control bags of ice that are located on the southernmost part of the city, he's able to dictate how cold the ice he controls is, on top of being able to freeze water to then control that once it turns to ice. Plus, for the time being, it doesn't seem like Deaton suffers any drawbacks from quirk overuse like Dobby. You know, Deaton himself boasted about how Dobby isn't good at fighting long fights because he starts to burn himself. Also, Deaton has better overall stats than Dobby does, according to the Ultra Analysis book. I know those stats don't necessarily dictate how strong a character is, but in this case, Deaton, I think, is stronger than Dobby right now. The number 2 spot goes to young receding hairline Redestra, the former commander of the Metal Liberation Army and president of Detonarat, wielding the quirk Stress. Stress allows Redestra to convert the stress he feels into raw power. The more stressed he is, the stronger he becomes. He is basically the Hulk, but can still think clearly while in stress mode. Before Shigure Aki awakened his quirk, he was able to stop decay by smashing the ground with his just raw strength alone. And when in 100% full stress mode, he's able to send blasts of raw energy from his hands as well. You can't forget that he's got a borderline perfect stat spread with 5 out of 6s across the board from the Ultra Analysis book. But Mark! Tokoyami was able to knock Redestra on his ass in the basement. He can't be that strong. Well, first of all, Redestra wasn't using maximum stress output there. And second, the prosthetic legs are what absolutely fucked him over there. If Redestra still had his human legs, which could be powered up by stress, there's no doubt in my mind he could have overpowered Darkstratum, without a doubt. But even though that happened, I'm still putting Redestra this high because I want this to be about all the villains' peak power we've seen them capable of so far. And of course, last but not least, the new Prince of Darkness himself, Shigure Aki Tomura. I know a lot of characters got buffed after My Villain Academia, but Shigure Aki has received the biggest buffs to date. Shigure Aki has been able to get decay to a point where it destroys anything his 5 fingers come into contact with instantly. And the decay continues to spread if the area he touched with all 5 of his fingers are connected to other things. When this dude was first introduced, decay wasn't even fast enough to destroy Aizawa's whole arm, even when Shigure Aki had all 5 of his fingers on Aizawa's elbow for a good 5 seconds. Now he's able to destroy an entire city. Shigure Aki can also decay things with a couple fingers too now, rather than all 5. The decay process is much slower though, but it's still a major improvement. And even though he doesn't really need to worry about making direct contact with someone to decay them anymore, he still never really had an issue in doing so because of how fast he was. He's probably on par, if not faster than Toga at this point. And if all of that wasn't enough, Shigure Aki now has 75% of the original all-for-one Quirk inside of him. We manga readers still have yet to see him use it in action because he literally just woke up, but come on, it's fucking all-for-one. Of course he's going to be bodying damn near everybody who tries to get in his way. I think that just about does it for this video. Hopefully this list isn't too scuffed. I always get nervous whenever I try to rank characters in fiction by strength. Let me know in the comments down below if you agree or disagree with this list. If there's anything you disagree with, like if you think a character is too high or too low, tell me. I'd love to know why. As usual, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like down below, and if you're new to the channel, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace out, take care, bye-bye.